talking about this very kind of stylistic, I say stylistic, use of the divine feminine in constant connection to the divine masculine, as though she cannot be unless he is there also. So there's this reference to the divine masculine, sometimes even in preference to or before the mention of the divine feminine, but it's always like a sort of complementary relationship of one to the other. And while that feeds romanticism endlessly, which we reject categorically, but that's a whole other subject, while it feeds into romanticism, which is one of the panaceas, one of the ways that thinking people, feeling people check out.
What do you mean when you say check out?
I mean turning over just basic common sense, just basic what is in my best interest here, towards this sort of lofty ideal of how women and men and women relate to one another in this sort of romance. Okay, so we reject romanticism, and we don't make any apologies for that, because we feel that has been a severe detriment to the empowering, the remembering, and the re-empowering of women as the source of the divine in living form on earth. Right. As the African woman, as a black woman, as the living embodiment of the divine creator of all universe. Okay, so we reject that. But what I wanted to comment on is there seems to be this sort of this wimpiness of, on one hand saying the divine feminine, and I'm goddess, and I'm powerful, and I'm all this and that, as though she is not complete. And so our premise is as though she, to herself, as the creator of all that is, including maleness, male energy, is one of herself. So this is where the divine masculines and the divine feminines don't want to go. They don't want to go back to when the beings on earth that were human were woman. And so there was really even no differentiation between woman and man, because the being was her. Right. Until she differentiated herself. They don't want to go there. No, because in this romantic view, the divine feminine cannot be who she is unless there's a divine masculine. Right. We reject that. Right. Right. And we realize this is against many of the teachings that are going out today, many of the self-stylized gurus, and many of the little caches of people, many of the thoughts in goddess circles. Now, what we are scholars and scientists and spiritualists all together, devotees to her. So we're not going about this, in some sort of romantic way. We're proving this through spirit and through science. And through our living condition. We live like that. Living our life, practical experience. Exactly. So I just wanted to comment on what I think is just a punking out. Say it. Just being a punk. And just not going further, claiming her primacy and having all these unnecessary attitudes that in doing so is betraying men, or in doing so is shoving them to the side or being a male basher. It's not even about that. It's simple truth.
Right.
Truth.
How do you consider that polygamy plays into the whole thing? Because I really don't know, because I remember in the early 80s and late 80s and early 90s, there were a couple of magazine articles. And I want to say in Essence magazine, maybe Ebony magazine, were black folks, and it was like women were posing the idea of polygamy. And then I've seen a couple of books go forward, and people are promoting this as the prime ideal for African families because of the alleged lack of black men and all this type of business. How does polygamy play into that? Because it seems, I just want to hear your answer. How does polygamy play into that?
Okay, if we're talking about polygamy in terms of a male having multiple wives,
right,
that's one thing. If we're talking about a polyamorous, or I don't even like that term. We're talking about a woman being clear about what she wants, and if what she wants is more than one husband, more than one lover. That's her divine right. That's her divine right. So on one hand, we're talking about instrumentation. We're talking about, in my view, objectification of woman as object, wife, serve, to construct, to build for the nation, for the community. And so the man, and I've had a brother tell me this, will secure as many women as he can and needs to get the job done. So she is of service, not in a spiritual sense, but in a laboring physical sense, whether it's production of her body for children, whether it's the production of her body towards work and edification, whether it's production of her body in terms of producing works that can be then marketed or sold. It's all kind of hovering or moving around him as the center. We reject that.
Right.
We reject that. The woman is the center. So if she decides that she wants a sister, then that's her decision. If she decides she wants two lovers, that's her decision. In a polygamous situation, I do not see that as being a good idea or in any way positive or benefiting for a woman. I've heard many arguments, historically as well as contemporary, and it's not just a characteristic or a tendency for black nationalists or black cultural type people who call themselves conscious to promote this. It's not a religious thing, although it can be centered often in religion, whether it's Islam or Mormonism, but these are patriarchal constructs. These are patriarchal political, social, economic, any way you look at it, constructs. So therefore, it's just ultimately not in the best interest for women. There's nothing about patriarchy that has stood up to be in the best interest for women, and therefore not in the best interest of children and ultimately men who are born of the woman.
I like how you mentioned the term wife in relationship. It never really dawned on me, although I kind of subconsciously understood that wife is an object. The concept of, because we say my wife, and of course women will say my husband. However, it doesn't have the same energetic connotation. It doesn't have the same vibration to it. My wife is more object in a non-goddess, non-black goddess consciousness vibration. Specifically, as you mentioned it in the polygamy thing, he has a number of wives, and he has them, indicating ownership. And so I like the way you hinged that on that like that. That was actually brilliant. I mean, I just never thought of me like that. Because my thought on it was simply So it's just a bad idea. It's just really just I mean, who is able spiritually to do that? What are we looking at? Are people like us right at this moment? And even if so, it would have to, like you said, it would have to be centered specifically on the woman. It can't be centered on the men. That's an asinine idea. Then we go right back to patriarchy.
I don't get it. And I'm entitled to not get it, just as others are entitled to get it and live it. I don't see it being good for her. Her spiritual center is focused on the man of God, whether it's in her temple, her church, or in her home. And instead of herself being goddess. In fact, I doubt these living situations even entertain the ideas of goddess, which truly sense. Not as this woman who's great in the bed, or this woman who's, speaks her mind, these sort of superficial costumes of goddessness. We're talking about a remembrance and return to a matrifocal, matriarchal, and you want to look at the word matriarch, you really look at the linguistics of what's happening with that word, okay, as being the model, as being the model. We are not in any way proposing that there's no place or purpose for men. That's not what we're proposing at all. We are espousing the proper, right, the true place and purpose of men inside of her. And there's just going to be resistance to that as long as the world is run the way that it is.
So then we have to create a new earth, man. A whole new vibration, a whole new thought process.
It's being knitted in the womb as we speak.